The Reserve Bank Governor is delivering a speech in Sydney after raising rates for a 10th straight time. Are there signs that inflation is starting to get under control? How many more rate rises to come? Well, this speech should give us some indication of where the economy is headed. Let's take you live to Sydney now. This is the RBA Governor, Philip Lowe.
Our communities are stronger when people who want to work can find a job and get the hours they want to work. Paid work not only generates income, but it helps people develop skills and helps people to progress up the ladder of opportunity. The positive labour market outcomes largely reflect the policy to stimulus that was delivered during the pandemic, the same factor that lies behind some of the current inflation. For a while, disruptions caused by the pandemic made it more difficult for firms to operate, and they had to hire some extra workers to deal with this. But the more important factor has been the support to aggregate demand provided by both the fiscal and monetary policy response during the pandemic. This support was primarily designed to protect against catastrophic economic outcomes, which it successfully did. But it also had the effect of underpinning a strong recovery in aggregate demand that has created jobs and that's delivered a sustainable reduction in unemployment. People have got jobs, kids can get jobs, they can progress up the ladder of opportunity. So it's a positive legacy of the pandemic. I think as we battle with inflation, it's worth remembering there is a more positive side to what's happened as well. And it's in our collective interest to preserve that positive side if we can. But I now want to return to the battle against inflation. In the December quarter, the headline inflation rate reached 7.8%. As you can see here, that's the highest rate in more than 3 decades. And as we know from the 1970s and the 1980s, high inflation is damaging and it undermines people's living standards. While the circumstances that gave rise to the current high inflation are different to those that occurred in the 70s and 80s, the effect of inflation is exactly the same. It erodes the value of people's savings, puts pressure on household budgets, and it hurts people on low incomes the most. And the economy simply doesn't work well if we've got high inflation. It's harder for businesses to plan, and people have to spend time protecting themselves against inflation rather than on more productive activities. And if inflation does become ingrained in expectations, it requires higher interest rates and a large increase in unemployment to get it back down again. To illustrate this point, as you can see in this graph, in both the United States and Australia, when high inflation became entrenched in the 70s and the 80s, the unemployment rate ultimately had to rise by 5 percentage points to get inflation back down. So if inflation does become ingrained, there is a very large cost to pay. And this is one reason why the Reserve Bank is determined to do what is necessary to make sure that the current period of high inflation is only temporary. We do not want inflation to become ingrained, and we'll do what's necessary to make sure that's the case.